Like ready for me to talk?
Yes, right now it's on, but it's just on the screen that says, just
Okay,
make
I'm
sure
not
that-
seeing it on mine.
I'm not seeing it either.
That's what I'm saying, make sure that it's on.
Oh, now I see it.
Now you see it?
I don't.
Yeah.
How do I get to it?
Yes. Okay, I'm not seeing it on mine.
Oh,
It's on?
now I am.
Sorry about that, everyone. It took us a minute or two to just get started there. Welcome, everyone. I am Lisa Weber, the Acting Superintendent for the Suffern Central School District. It's my pleasure this evening to be joined by Dr. Lisa Castaldo, our Assistant Superintendent of PPS and the head of our reopening team. Also in the background, we're joined by our Director of Technology, Eric Coronado, and we have visiting us from BOCES, from their public relations support team. We have Ashley Columbia, so thank you for being here. So this is our fourth parent meeting, our first of what we'll call the second round, as required by Governor Cuomo. Just for everyone's information, we have 2 more meetings scheduled for next week. On Monday night, we have an elementary specific meeting at 6:30. And on Wednesday night, we have a secondary, that's middle school and high school meeting, scheduled also at 6:30. In between those, on Tuesday night, we do have a Board of Education meeting. Because we're doing the specific elementary and secondary meetings this week, tonight's details will really largely be centered around district-wide items. We're not going to get into detail about what we're going to do in this school or that school for lunch or for counselors, or we're not going to get into those details today. That will all be saved for next week's meetings. So, Mr. Coronado, if you could go to maybe the agenda slide. And I'm going to start with a little welcome. Then Dr. Castaldo is going to give us some details on the specific plans that were required by Governor Cuomo last Friday. So on Friday, August 7th, he, in addition to the plan that we had previously put together that our reopening team worked on, he wanted teased out of that plan specifically our COVID-19 testing plan, our contact tracing plan, and our remote learning plan. And so Dr. Castaldo will take us through the details of those. We will address some frequently asked questions. Those are the questions that folks have submitted to our reopening team email. And then we will take live questions. You'll notice that you haven't been able to use the chat feature. While Dr. Castaldo and I give our information, we're gonna turn that chat off. Once we're done and we're ready for live questions, somewhere around between 6:50 and 7, we will open it up to live questions. We do want you to listen because we think we're gonna answer a lot of your questions. Next slide. So, school starts September 10th. That is a little different than you may recall, and there's an asterisk there on purpose. We are going to move the election day superintendent's conference day, or we're going to recommend to the board, they're going to vote on it on Tuesday night, that we move the election day superintendent's conference day from November 3rd to September 9th. This will give us an additional day of professional development to help get our teachers started on a year that's going to start like no other. And so school starts for students on September 10th. School starts just like every other year, it just won't be in person right away. So we are going to phase in. We are allowing certain activities in our buildings to take place. These involve small groups of students and are targeted for specific activities such as orientations, materials pickup, meeting teachers, and so we will gradually bring people into our buildings. This remote plan was a deliberate shift that was worked on all summer long. So our reopening team, which involved over 100 members of our community, teachers, administrators, staff members, parents, Part of that plan was our robust remote instruction plan, which Dr. Castaldo is going to give some more of the details for later in the presentation. But this was crafted by the reopening team. As I said, it included administrators, teachers, and parents. A few things to note about this plan. School is starting. Remote instruction will not look in September what it looked like last spring. There will be live sessions. There will be daily contact with teachers. Attendance will be taken. There will be a schedule. There will be routines. There will be grades. So it is definitely going to look different than it looked in the spring. And as I said, we'll have some more details about that. So I've been asked a few times over the last day, why was this decision made? How did this decision get made? So I want to share some of the things that went into this decision. The first and foremost is safety. This decision was made with the health and safety of our 4,000 students and 700 staff members as our number one priority. Any other decision that was made was not putting the health and safety of our students and our staff as the number one priority. When Governor Cuomo required last Friday that we submit separately our testing plan, our COVID-19 testing plan, and our tracing plan, we have those plans, so they're as good as we can get them. And as we really looked at the details of them, though, we really had some concerns. Concerns around testing. Anyone who's been tested here knows that the tests are taking 5 to 10 days turnaround time. So if we have a suspected case, it could be over a week before we know if that's confirmed or not. Yes, I know there's rapid testing. Rapid testing is accurate when it's a strong positive, but 20% of the time, false negatives result from the rapid testing. So that's not necessarily a reliable indicator when we're talking about 4,700 people. This was a really significant part of our decision making. The testing in our community is not where it needs to be for us to run in-person schooling at the scale, even at the 50% scale, the hybrid scale we would need to do. So we are hopeful that those testing times are going to improve, or that other methods or other resources will become available to us. The third factor, besides safety and testing and tracing, are supply chain issues. So what I mean by that is, last spring, we got right on top of it. We ordered our masks, we ordered our PPE, our gloves, our masks, our sanitizer, our cleaning supplies. We are all set with all that stuff. What we didn't know until the middle of July was when the guidance came out, was that we were going to need isolation tents in case an ill student or an ill staff member, someone became ill at school, that we were going to need to isolate them. We didn't know that we were going to need dividers for all of our front office staff, nurses, people interacting with the public. And it turns out that all 700 districts in New York are trying to get those items at the same time. And so while we placed our orders for isolation tents as soon as we knew we need them, we have yet to receive any of them. With respect to dividers, you would think, oh, that's easy. Everywhere I go, there's dividers. There's dividers at the supermarket. There's dividers at the doctor's office. Well, it turns out that many of those dividers are not allowed in school because we have much stricter fire codes than most businesses do. So often dividers, I know at my hairdresser, they have shower curtains hung at the hairdresser. You can't use those in schools. The plexiglass dividers that you see most places when you're going out, again, plexiglass we can't use in schools. It doesn't meet fire code. So that leaves us with two choices. It leaves us with tempered glass, which is very expensive and very heavy, and the alternative, which is a polycarbonate, which is what we have ordered. Unfortunately, at this point, we have only received 25% of the polycarbonate dividers that we placed the order for. So those supply chain issues continue, just like we had a problem with PPE and toilet paper in the spring. They're continuing as we move through this pandemic with different needs. Everyone needs these things at the same time. And as schools, we are faced with different challenges than, stores and other places that we go. Another thing that's happening with the supply chain is in some cases, they're being quarantined when they're shipped from places that are high-risk areas. So in some cases, there are some of the things we need could be sitting at the airport or in the shipping port because they were sent from a quarantined area. So this is some of the information that I was struggling with over the weekend and early this week. In talking to the stakeholders, in talking to the administration, the board, staff, and the staff responsible for executing our hybrid plans, I could not say that in the current state, that if we opened up hybrid, I was putting the health and safety of our 4,700 members of our school community as our top priority. In consulting with all of those stakeholders, it became clear that the only way we could say that the health and safety of our 4,700 people in our community was being put first was that if we opened with a remote start. So that's how that decision was arrived at. We know that there's a lot of disagreement with that decision, and I couldn't write all this in my letter yesterday, so that's why I wanted to take the time today to share that. I do want to mention just a little bit, we'll come back to the transition to hybrid later, but I do want to talk a little bit about the transition. As mentioned earlier, we are hosting some events in our buildings, orientations, possibly the SAT, a final decision on that hasn't been made yet. All of these are tests to make sure all of our protocols are in place, that they're practical. By easing in with smaller groups, we can make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs. And we fully intend, assuming the start of school goes well in reopening in other districts that are opening in a hybrid environment, we fully intend to open up our schools more fully at the end of September, beginning of October. That is absolutely our intention, and we're laying all the pieces to help make that happen. One more thought I was going to say, one other thing I want to say about that. So we are well-intentioned. I know people want to go back to school. In my own house, people disagree with this decision I made. Folks want kids back in school. I want kids back in school. But going back to the safety for a moment, if we're all compliant and we're all well-intentioned, one of the stakeholders I spoke to used the phrase, we still need to be near perfect in order to not spread the virus. And that just felt like too tall an order at this time while we still have unknowns. With that said, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Castaldo so she can share a lot of the details around our testing, tracing, and remote learning plans.
Good evening. So let's unpack all of this just a little bit and talk a little bit about how we're probably all feeling. Frustrated, angry, upset that we have spent 5 months basically since March locked in our houses, not doing what we wanted to do, and now school's not starting. And that's probably the straw that's breaking the camel's back, and I understand fully. As a mother of 6, most of my children are adult age, but as a mother of 6, one of whom was a senior last year and lost his entire senior year, and is now looking at going to university, but doing remote learning in his dorm room, I'm frustrated and angry too, very angry. As a grandmother of 7, 2 of whom attend school in upstate New York, I'm very angry that their schooling is not going to look the same in September. But then I say to myself, wait a minute, let's take a step back. Let's look at those classrooms again that I showed you, I believe, a week and a half ago. This is what the classrooms look like. And these are not high school classrooms. These are elementary classrooms. These children are not going back to the soft surfaces, bright, colorful environments, furniture that really is conducive for that, social interaction and learning. They're going back to desks, 6 feet apart, hard surfaces, wearing their masks all the time with some mask breaks. They're not going to be allowed to have interactive play, interactive close conversation in the classroom. It's all very different than what they left in March, and not something that they're going to easily be able to be perfect in, as Mrs. Weber mentioned. We're looking at everyone needing to be perfect. So let's talk again.
Near perfect.
Near perfect.
Near perfect.
Near perfect. We'll give it near perfect. So let's talk again a little bit about what September will look like. September, when we start and do a small phase-in transition to hybrid in-person instruction, September will have remote instruction. To give everyone an idea of what that means, the 6 days, because on average it was 6 days that your child would have been in person in the school building, they will instead have instruction at home. Instruction at home that will look very different than the instruction in March, which was a crisis response to abrupt closure of schools. Now we're talking about a well thought out, robust remote plan, and I'll give you some more details on that later. But instead of the 6 days in school, in that environment that I showed you, they're going to be at home learning. They will be given opportunities, targeted groups of opportunities to come in and have targeted activities in the school building, so we can test our protocols, our response, and the students' response to the protocol needs and precautions that we have to have in place. Besides the precautions we need to have in place with the school classrooms, we need to have COVID-19 screening, and if you can go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about that. Each day your child is in person in school, they need to have their temperature taken in the morning. The first day of attendance of any week they're attending, you as parents would need to fill out the questionnaire form. Daily, staff need to take their temperature and fill out the questionnaire form. If any symptoms arise while in the school building, a temperature, any sort of sore throat, runny nose, anything that falls into the COVID-19 checklist that the CDC has given us, we need to isolate your child. That's either going to be a room in the building or those tents when they arrive. And then your child will wait with supervision until you arrive to pick them up, or if we need to transport them. They can't return to that in-person learning until we have documentation from medical personnel that they either have a COVID-19 negative test or that they are no longer exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. The testing, let's talk a little bit about that. Can you move to the next slide? So testing would either be with your private healthcare provider or with the Rockland County Department of Health. And the issue there is exactly as Mrs. Weber spoke about, that turnaround time. If it takes 10 days to get the test back, it's 10 days your child is home waiting and all of their classmates are waiting to find out and on possible quarantine. And again, there's no return to school unless you're following the Rockland County Department of Health guidelines regarding return. Let's talk about contact tracing. So if we have a child with symptoms or a staff member, if we have someone who comes up with a positive test, we need to work with the Rockland County Department of Health and do contact tracing. That's going to be dependent upon the accurate attendance records we have and the visitor log we would have for these staff members. That contact tracing could include quarantine of vast quantities of students or staff and closing off parts of the building so that we can deep clean them. So that, again, not something that is conducive for effective learning in the school environment. But let's talk a little bit then about robust remote learning and how that's different than the crisis distance learning that your child was a piece of, or a part of, during March, April, May, and June. So robust remote ensures that there is substantive daily contact with your child by one of their teachers, all of their teachers, each day your child has contact with a teacher. That would include a homeroom with attendance and visual check-in. So every day we're putting eyes on your child and we're ensuring they're okay. And we're looking for things like, are they doing well socio-emotionally? Are they handling this environment? Are they getting their work in? We're going to be working heavily in September on building rapport and relationships with your children, because that's key to effective learning, and it's key to engagement and their continued successful engagement with the remote learning environment. There will be both synchronous and asynchronous teaching, and those are fancy words for in-person live or recorded, and then just straight recorded or activities your child is completing. But there will be screen time considerations. So I'm not referring to a full day of your child watching a screen. I'm referring to their staff, their teacher, meeting with them, doing a mini lesson perhaps, doing a full lesson, doing a set of directions, and your child completing the tasks. We have to be very mindful of the screen time best practices that have been told to us. Children usually can handle a screen time about as long as their age. So a 10-year-old, 10 minutes of screen time, and then they're doing an activity. Now that's just an example. That is not a definite, but to give you an idea of what we need to be mindful of when we're using best practices in remote teaching. We're looking at compressed curriculum at this point, which means the most essential core information will be taught to your child. As soon as we are able to return to regular traditional in-person school, we'll be able to start to relax that compressed curriculum. But for now, compressed curriculum, what is the essential content? That is what will be taught. Tech repair space and also device deployment will occur before September, and then there will be repair spaces in each school building. So you can easily turn in a device that's not working, get a new device for your child, and make sure they are always up, always able to participate in the remote learning opportunities. And traditional grading practices, which Mrs. Weber already mentioned, will be in place. Things like attendance, participation, completing your activities will be done. The next slide, and we will be sharing this so you'll be able to access it later. The next slide is just a sample secondary remote learning schedule. As you can see, it's a traditional schedule that's going to mimic a normal schedule. That does not mean all of these periods the entire time your child would be on the screen, but that is when they will be doing the different courses they will be taking. And the next slide, one last slide, is the elementary sample schedule. Both of these schedules, you can link to them and access them more fully and a little bigger so you can see them better in the remote learning plan, which along with the COVID-19 testing plan, the contact tracing plan, and the remote learning plan, all of those are linked to the very front page of our website, as we were required by Governor Cuomo to do in his last set of directives on Friday. So that's what remote learning looks like. I'm sure you can see that while it is not ideal, there are vast opportunity for effective instructional practices, and remote learning can occur. Very clear, strong educational activities for your child in this environment. And we will be transitioning to, by using those phase-in activities throughout September, we will be transitioning to, the hybrid learning environment, which is going to afford your child 2 days a week in school if they are in grades 2 through 12. Got that right. We are hoping to bring in K through 1 4 days a week, certain targeted populations of ENL and special ed 4 days a week, starting with the hybrid schedule. So I think now we're up to questions, and they're signaling that I took way too much time. But why don't we get started with some questions?
I actually was the one who took too much time. You did a good job, Dr. Castaldo.
Okay.
Well, one of our areas of frequently asked questions had to do with special services.
Okay.
So since you are our special services guru,
I'll get started with that. Okay, special services. Let me start with this. There were a lot of questions about, well, my child doesn't attend classes in Suffern Central School District. They attend classes at either one of our out-of-district places or a class that's in another Rockland County School District. Those children will be transported to their programs as long as the program is in person. So each of those decisions would be made individually by either Rockland BOCES, the out-of-district placement, or the district in which your child's classroom sits. So as we kind of funnel through before September, we'll know who those children are. We will ensure that you have transportation to that. The plan for students in our special ed programs for September is obviously they will be on our remote special services plan. That again is in the full plan that was submitted to New York State about reopening, but I can be sure to kind of pull that out, even though we weren't required to, and place that on the website as well, separately for you to be able to see. It's a little different than the crisis special ed services that were given through the spring, in that we have now a well-developed program of teletherapy and classroom participation for those students, and we'll be doing it that way for September, and when you're on hybrid for your remote days as well. I think that kind of covers all the ones I have on that. Do you want to go on? What's the next topic?
I can talk, I'll talk about full remote. So we still have a lot of questions of people who say they don't want to come back hybrid, folks who want to stay full remote. Parents do have the choice to opt their children to stay fully remote. And to do that, we will have a form with that. We didn't want to send it yesterday because we just thought it would get really confusing. So if you would like to, for now, you can email your principal and let them know that you would like to be fully remote. If you're not ready to make that decision yet, you'll have time. We'll probably have a form that comes out in a week or two for that. But in the meantime, you're welcome to email your principal. One of the questions we got is, if I'm in person, if we're in the hybrid, can I then choose to go fully remote? Or if I'm fully remote, my child's fully remote, and we're in hybrid, can my child change? So the answer to all of those are yes. However, we would ask that you do communicate with the school building. There's a couple buildings, a couple grades where we're really tight on social distancing in the classroom, and that if we get, if we have one or two more kids than we are expected, it's just really tight. So we ask that you do communicate that to us.
One of the other questions we've gotten is about homeschooling. If you are currently submitting a homeschooling request, or I should say, you want to elect that as an option, we are calling to make sure that what you meant was you wanted to actually homeschool your child, pull them out of the school district altogether and homeschool them, or what you meant was the full remote option. And depending on your response to that, we'll either send you the full remote information or the homeschooling paperwork where you complete an IHIP.
We have a few other prepared questions, but we also want to make sure we want to give time for the live chat. So we are now going to enable the live chat and then have a minute or two to sort of allow Ashley to sort through the questions. And then also note that we have it on slow mode, so you can't fire off consecutive questions to us. There has to be a break in between. That just gives more people the opportunity to submit questions. You may need to refresh your browser. So if the chat is not coming up for you, if you don't see it, please refresh, and I'll tell you when you should expect to see it. Not yet? Okay, so maybe we can address a little something else. Food service. Food service will continue in September. Many of you know we have been feeding many of our students throughout the closure and all summer long. Our schedule for several months now has been deliveries on Monday and Thursday. Monday's delivery includes breakfast and lunch for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday delivery includes Thursday and Friday. We do anticipate that continuing in September.
Okay, when we talk about socio-emotional learning, one of our initiatives for the last 2 years has been the Yale EI program, and we are in our third year starting this new school year with the Yale EI implementation, and that year was the year that we were rolling it out to families and community. We intend to still do that. Yale EI is working feverishly to come up with the remote activities to enable us to do that. And they have begun piloting a socio-emotional screener, which will enable us to address students' socio-emotional needs in a quicker fashion because we'll be able to recognize them quicker. We're very excited about that as well. As always, if you feel your child has an issue, a mental health issue, an emotional issue, you should contact your school principal, myself, the clinicians in your building, and we can assist you. Do we have chat?
So the chat has started, so we have one question: will non-public school busing still be available?
Yes, just like we're busing for out-of-district for in-person learning, non-public busing for in-person learning will continue.
Another question: are we going to be in a Zoom call with the whole class?
So we'll continue to use Google Meet, and yes, there will be Google Meets that involve the whole class. Sometimes there'll be small groups. That'll depend on what is being taught, what is being learned, and what's being worked on.
Will contact tracing include kids who have shared bus rides?
When we initiate contact tracing, we of course do it under the guidance of the Rockland County Department of Health. We will give them all of the information that they ask us to provide. I'm sure that would include all of the students on a bus if a child on a bus comes up with symptoms or a positive COVID test. We need to know anyone who was within the 6 feet of space, that's a close contact, and they also identify proximate contacts, which are further out, 10 feet, 20 feet out. So those sorts of information would be given under the guidance of the Rockland County Department of Health.
What type of training has been provided to the staff for them to execute the synchronous learning?
So we work with the Lyric, which is part of Southern Westchester BOCES, who provides a lot of our technology support. We have a technology instructional coach that we have worked with for a number of years, who has been providing professional development all summer. We also have some of our own staff members who were really, really shone in the spring, who were really using technology very effectively with their students. So we've had them provide training. We've also supported our teachers with the ability to attend BOCES training, NICE-GATE training, all kinds of opportunities. One of the sort of positive outcomes of the pandemic has been that we're not sending folks anywhere. So we're not paying for hotels, we're not paying for mileage. All we're paying for is people to participate in the activities so we can actually have more people participate. That's the other reason is we're moving the conference day to Wednesday, September 9th. Obviously, we're not going to teach everyone everything in a day, but it will be an opportunity to really give people the confidence that they're ready to move forward for those who need it.
If my children need computers for fall, who should they contact?
So we'll be sending out a new form that'll come out through Connect Ed, and you'll indicate there if you want to continue to use the device you already had. If you need a device, we do have devices for every student in the district. So if you need one, you'll let us know when we send out that form. K through 4 will be iPads, 5 through 12 will be Chromebooks.
Will teachers be live streaming from their actual classrooms?
They may or may not be. When we're in the hybrid, they definitely will be. When they're in the remote, they may or may not.
How much time will live lessons be versus a list of assignments to do throughout the day?
That varies tremendously by the age, what's being taught, how complex the content is, versus how complex or how much time it takes to do the activity that the kids are doing. So we can't really give an answer on that.
How will we substitute the hands-on learning often included in science classes?
So science does have, there are flexibility. The state in the guidance that we received in July gave flexibility for science in terms of being able to use digital platforms. Of course, that doesn't necessarily do science justice, but our teachers will be working to try and help students who are home duplicate those hands-on experiences with, everyday household materials to the extent possible. We'll also have the opportunity, I don't think we mentioned this yet, along with kids being able to come in September and meet their teachers, we will also have material drop-offs. So there may be instances where the art teacher wants to have, the opportunity to give kids certain materials. That could be true for science materials as well, math manipulatives, library books, so that there's some type of opportunity, again, for kids to get near the building and to get some of those resources that we really struggled to get families last spring when we were in a lockdown environment.
How do we meet our teachers? Are we going to meet them on Google Meet?
So yes, they will be met on Google Meet, but we're also planning to set up opportunities to meet both prior to school starting and early in the school year. Those will vary by building and by grade. We'll talk a little bit about those next week.
What about IEP, like OT and speech therapy? What will happen with those services?
So during September, when we're on full remote instruction, we will also be on remote or teletherapy as we were through the spring. And then we will slowly start to ease that in as we transition to the hybrid program, with it being in person.
Will each subject have live streamed classes, and how often each week?
Yes, the exact details, particularly the middle school and high school schedule, are not available yet. They should be available by the end of next week, so we'll know how many periods are meeting each day, that kind of stuff. Those details are still being worked out. I think in the sample schedule that Dr. Castaldo shared, it was 4 each day, but that's a sample. All the details haven't been worked out on that yet.
But when we meet next week, we'll have a better idea. I think that secondary meeting is on Wednesday at 6:30.
Will after-school clubs or honor society activities continue?
The expectation at the high school and middle school is that the extra class activities will continue virtually where needed, in person where they can, but even in the hybrid schedule, that's hard to do when only half the kids are there. So it may again be hybrid, just like the classes are. Some of the kids are in person and some of the kids are virtual. And during remote, that's a good question for the secondary meeting next week.
Okay, while we're waiting for new questions to come in, if you could repeat the question or your answer. This way we can make sure that everybody can hear what's
Okay.
being asked. So what is the criteria for the partial return to school? Just again reinforcing the importance of health and safety for the district.
Okay, so the criteria, it's not a set criteria. The criteria for transitioning to hybrid is that we're ready, everyone's ready, everyone's health and safety can be assured, and let's say the schools that are reopening, let's make sure they reopen successfully in September. I do want to add that, there's more districts every day that are kind of joining us in the remote September. 3 more districts in the Hudson Valley today said that they were, going to be remote in September. And several of the districts in the county are using all of their professional development days the first week of September, and so they're not starting any instruction until the 14th. We're possibly looking at our hybrid starting only 2 weeks after their hybrid. This isn't a months-long project, but it gives us enough time to make sure that we can put our community's health and safety as our #1 priority.
Can all schools share a start time, lunch time, and end time?
They know because of busing and cafeterias. So we can't have all the schools on the same schedule because when we're hybrid, we don't have that many buses. So we have to be on what's called a tiered schedule for busing. And in terms of lunch, when we're in remote, there has been some conversation about a family lunch, so that people in the same household are having lunch at the same time. That's one of the details that'll be worked out next week.
Will election day be a school day in the district?
Yes. So the question was, will election day be a school day? Yes.
The 10th question, many of us are wondering why there cannot be outdoor learning.
So there can be outdoor learning, and in fact, we do want to encourage our teachers to have students outside as much as possible. There are some legalities around the tents, so we can have canopies, like that you see at sports events and stuff, when you go to a tournament and each team is under their canopy. We can have canopies which socially distance fit 4 or 5 kids maybe in them. A tent is actually considered a building structure, and it has to meet all state ed building codes, which means it has to meet fire codes and fire alarm codes, and has to have a certain floor, and has to have certain air circulation. So while I know it sounds like, why don't you just do that? It's not a realistic option. You need certificates of occupancy. We do have some canopies which don't require all of that, but as I said, they only fit 4 or 5 students at a time. You put a couple together, you can fit a class, you can fit, half a class. We also, while September and October are pretty nice months weather-wise, then we get into the pretty cold weather.
Can school schedules and teacher assignments be released as soon as possible?
We'll talk about that next week.
When we are in remote learning, can we swap schedules?
I'm not sure what that question means. What would you swap if we're in remote learning?
Meaning a high schooler whose schedule maybe has the wrong elective on it?
I don't know what that means.
So if high school students were
Right.
able to start later.
So high school students, whenever you have an issue with your schedule, what you do is you reach out to your guidance counselor. So first and foremost, that's what you're going to do, and then we can work the problem depending on what the issue is, whether it's the wrong elective or you changed your mind about the elective. If you're talking completely swapping your schedule, I'm not sure if what they mean is change cohort once we're in hybrid, A or B, and that is going to be handled through the principal. So I would start with the guidance counselor, and then we'll work from there.
Will students who were previously receiving enrichment classes continue receiving those classes?
Yes. The schedules of students, all of the offerings that they would have in an in-person environment, they will have in the remote environment. The schedule itself may be different, but the offerings are the same.
And that would include enrichment or AIS extra help type work that your child might be getting.
Will full-time remote students from the same grade be placed into a single class?
Most likely, I would say, so the question is, will fully remote students choosing to stay remote or a year be placed into the same class? We, at this point, we don't know how many are gonna do it, how many are gonna stay in it. Also, I would say probably likely not. The numbers I've seen so far would not lend themselves to a full class. So I doubt it, but if the numbers come to be that way, then it could be considered, but it's unlikely.
What happens if the Wi-Fi or internet access becomes unavailable?
So if Wi-Fi or internet access becomes unavailable, we do have a number of Wi-Fi personal portable hotspots. That was something we ordered in the spring, and we have those available to students and families who need those. That will be part of the request process when technology devices are requested and given out prior to the start of school. Wi-Fi portable hotspots for those who need them will also be available.
Once the district goes into a hybrid model, how long would that be in effect until full in-person can resume?
The only way we can resume full in-person is if the governor says we no longer have to socially distance. So if the requirement is that we are socially distanced at school, the only way we can do that is with the hybrid model.
Are devices going to be provided free to district families in need?
The devices are provided to Suffern Central students. Any Suffern Central student who needs one will have a device. If we're in the hybrid, they will need to bring them back and forth.
We have about 10 minutes.
Kyle? Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for all of your questions, all of your feedback. I know we didn't get to all of them. That's not something we can really do in this amount of time. There are 2 of us, there are 4,000 of you. We, are doing our best to answer the most common questions, the ones we see the most frequently. There are 2 more opportunities next week for questions. We can continue, to use the reopening team at sufferancentral.org email to send us
Can
questions.
you put that slide up, Eric? We do have a slide with that, so if you can put that up so everyone can see it.
Okay.
Okay.
I do want to go back and just reiterate for those of you who may have just joined us or not joined us at the beginning, I do want to go back to the beginning. School is starting in September. We will be remote for September. In many cases, really just 2 more weeks than some of the other schools in Rockland. One school in Rockland has already, said they're going remote. This decision was made with the health and safety of our entire community as the #1 priority. I know there are people that are not happy. I know that people are struggling, particularly with childcare. I know the mental health of our children is important here. I also know that their physical health is very important as well, and all of our physical health. I hear, like I said, I hear it in my own house. We're not all on the same page in our house. But we have to, be there for our children, support them from our role as teachers and educators, our role as parents, working on this together. There is no decision that was going to be made that was going to make everyone happy. We saw that in our survey. In our survey, our community is very divided on this issue. We know that. Within that division, we have folks that want to be fully remote. We have folks that want to be fully back. We have folks who are unsure. We want to make sure we are doing what's in the best health and safety of our entire community. And so that's, where this decision was made. Were there anything else come up?
If you could just touch back on IEPs again, what will happen with those services?
So IEP services will be provided, similar to the way they were in the spring, but we have a fully developed remote teletherapy program going at this point. We'll be able to enact those services even quicker based on the teletherapy program that we're using. We also, all of our classes will be the same as the requirements for robust remote for gen ed classes. All of our special ed will be following that format as well. So there will be daily contact. There will be live seeing your teacher. There will be that hands-on, face-to-face contact, even if it's through a screen with the teacher and your child.
I saw a question that, two questions that I wanted, they're related. One question was about working parents, another question was about the Y. So we're in talks with the Y to figure out how the Y can best support our families. So hopefully we have information in a week or two, the YMCA, before and after school programs, and possibly looking at some during the day programs for the month of September. So those are conversations we're having. I just don't have any actual information to share, confirmed information to share yet. Okay, Dr. Costado, is there anything you wanted to conclude with?
I just wanted to stress to all the families that we know this isn't ideal. It's going to be a phase-in of the hybrid format. I want you to just think for a little bit when the restaurants started opening in Rockland County. We weren't all allowed to go to the restaurant, go inside, sit down and eat. They phased it in. The governor was quite clear that he wanted them to phase in. This is a similar phase in. We can't just bring all of the students that fit socially distanced in all at one time on the first day of in-person learning. So we're going to start instruction, we're going to start learning at home, and we're going to slowly bring in targeted groups for targeted activities, much the same way that restaurants started bringing outside tables of people that they could handle with their waiters and waitresses, and they tested their protocols. How is it working with all of us having to clean everything? How is it working with those disposable menus? How does it work with the waitress wearing the mask all the time? This is a similar phase-in, and it's essential for us to do this phase-in, to test our protocols, to test our procedures, to make sure that children can operate around the building safely with the different movement patterns we have enacted, with the different protocols and the cleaning procedures that are in place. I want you to trust us, and especially Mrs. Weber, that this decision was made with the safety of the students, the staff, the entire Suffern Central community in mind first and foremost. And that was always the goal of the reopening team. That was number one goal. So this decision was made with that in mind, and we will phase in and transition to hybrid, where your students, your children, will be in school 2 days a week, which is going to work out to be approximately 6 to 8 days a month. But for September, instruction and learning in that format will be remote.
Thank you. I'll also conclude by saying I know this is, we know this is a divisive topic in our community. Not everyone feels the same way. We are Mounties. We will get through this together. We will respect each other's opinions, know that we don't disagree, and that school is going to start. School is back in September. I know that our teachers will work incredibly hard to develop those relationships from the first minute they get to see their students virtually and in person. We'll get our content rolling, and our children will be learning, and they'll be safe. Thank you.